and the opportunity. Just this thing popped up. I'll just hit okay. So thank you everybody for attending as well. Wanted to talk a little bit about our where we've been going in terms of livestock supply. We've had a big couple of years here during COVID in terms of expansion of our own farming operations, and the lamb market has lit on fire the last 16 months. So we'll wanted, in a 45-minute period, try to cover off as much as we can on this topic. We had just finished our latest contract drive the last 4 or 5 weeks. So some of the slides are from that as well. I'll just start running through. So I'll give you a brief overview of what our company is at the moment. The lamb supply challenge that we've been dealing with for almost 50 years now is probably our biggest opportunity. I'll touch on the market escalation that we've seen, and then where we're headed in terms of lamb supply for the plan. So as a brief overview of NALC, our vision is to use art, science, and design to become the preeminent sheep products business in North America. So we were known as SunGold was the company we were before we merged, and since the merger in 2018, we've been focused on still the Canadian market is our most important market, but as we grow, we want to develop more into the North American market for our products. Our core values: tell the truth, do no harm, eyes wide open, and transform the ordinary. There's a lot behind all those 4 things, but that's what we've been striving for internally. Our overall structure is we have 2 main shareholders. Integrated Foods is a New Zealand-based company. They're very much like ourselves. They have a lamb plant that could do about 1,000 lambs a day, and they have a land holding in the North Island that they have some sheep farming operations as well. Our other side of the shareholders are Canadian-based. They were the main shareholders of SunGold and the finishing unit here in Iron Springs, and that's the Canada Gold Beef Group. Predominantly cattle feeders here in southern Alberta. When I say here, I guess I'm literally at the Iron Springs location this evening. So when I say here, that's what I'm meaning at this stage. Since the merger, some of these logos at the bottom are maybe new to some of you here. So Canada Lamb Processors is the renaming of what was SunGold. That's the processing plant in Innisfail. Working backwards, Canada Lamb Growers is the finishing unit in Iron Springs. We have since built a breeding unit on site. And then the breeding units and the growing unit in Manitoba is the Canada Sheep and Lamb Farms. So just a map of where we're at. So in the Alberta operations, we have CLP, the processing plant in Innisfail, Iron Springs, and growing unit, and the Canada Lamb Growers here at Iron Springs. And then in Manitoba, we have 4 operations, 3 breeding units in Sarto's, the original one, near Steinbach, followed by Lundar in the north of Winnipeg, about an hour. Near Winnipeg is Rockwood. That's another breeding unit, and then Stony Mountain is our growing unit, about 7 miles away from Rockwood. So here's another view of the 7 operating units. So we have Canada Lamb Processors, Canada Lamb Growers, and then the 4 breeding units are the Blue Sheep, and with Stony Mountain being the growing operation in Manitoba. So the breeding units in Manitoba will take lambs to weaning, and then from weaning they'll go to the growing unit, stay there for another 6 weeks, and then they'll come to Iron Springs for finishing, which takes 10 to 12 weeks generally. Some of you have seen this slide before. So we've been really striving to be a fully integrated, vertically integrated company, from genetics right through to marketing. The goal is off-season lambing. So we breed every week. So we lamb every week. So we're trying to stabilize our supply 52 weeks of the year. Our long-term goal is to create the best lamb eating experience. So that starts at genetics through to feeding all the way down the line. I got some pictures here. So the top left is our Stony Mountain phase 1 growing unit. This is where we let, after they've taken to 14 weeks, we will select ewes and we'll take them to 32 weeks before 32, 35 weeks in that range for breeding. The bottom corner there is a picture of our Sardo lambing unit with the older style where we have lambs use lambing in big groups and then they move them into jugs. Here's a picture of Iron Springs finishing unit. We have shelters through half the finishing unit. And this is one of the TMR finishing pens. Here's a picture of the Iron Springs location last January since the expansion in the breeding unit. So in the bottom corner there is our breeding unit. We have a lambing barn, a lactation barn, and a secondary lactation system. And the breeding units all to this bottom of the picture, which is towards the east, and then the finishing units off to the west side of that, out of the unit. Sorry, my phone's going off. Here's a picture of the plant. Many of you guys would be familiar with this. This is an Innisfail. Inside the plant, here's just some selected pictures. One is of the harvest floor with that we renovated in built in 2015. Adjacent to that is the value-added room, which we started operating in 2016. It makes the products in the bottom left there, where we have the sausage and burgers and meatballs. We've done some repackaging on that. Some of the packaging, there's a different style pack out in the market right now, but this is what we launched with. We launched with 10 items. And then over to the bottom right, here's how we merchandise the products. Generally at a meat location that's got a decent sized lamb section, they'll have our lamb products. They'll maybe cut the chops above that, and then we'll have the value added presented nearby. So our brands and markets, we have three main brands that we're going with. The Sungold brand is well known. It's the Canadian lamb, Canadian lamb product that's from our Western Canadian lamb producers. Lamb Tonight's the brand we have on the value added product. The theory there is we're trying to make sure it's very clear that it's lamb and that it's easy to use. It's convenient, so you can make it for tonight. And Lamb Club's going to be the new brand we're going to focus on, and that's around the vertical integration and the optimized eating experience. So part two is the lamb supply challenge. So, we opened up the plant in 1974. Obviously, it was a co-op called Lamco, and it's changed hands a few times. But I think the supply challenge remains the same. Some of these slides I used in a presentation to producers a couple years ago. It gives a bit of an overview, and we'll run through it again here. If you have some detailed questions, we get into it. So this is what I would call a simulated demand curve over the course of a year. It starts in January, it goes to December. Start the year, January, February is a bit of a lull after the previous Christmas. So sales tend to taper. And it builds up for a strong Easter demand, which would be that first spike. And it comes back down again. Generally, this is just the demand side. And then usually every long weekend, we have retailers wanting to feature items. So those would be the three little bumps. And then there tends to be a little bit of a tapering off before Thanksgiving, which is that spike. And then it tapers off before Christmas, before it climbs rather dramatically again. So the supply side of the equation, though, tends to be quite a different story. So there's a lot of supply tends to be in the fall and at Christmas time, and then some feedlots like ourselves or others will stretch lambs for the Easter market. But there's a real big shortage typically right after Easter and before the spring lambs hit the market. And for a meat industry, this is pretty unfortunate. This May long weekend and into the summer is when a lot of retailers like to feature lamb or feature meat products, let's say, and lamb in Canada is in quite short supply. So it becomes a bit of an issue when we're trying to launch new things or come up with new things in the summer. From a plant capacity standpoint, the plant likes to run pretty even all along. So we have capacity for 1,600 or 1,700 head a week based on two harvests a week. Our cooler can hold about 850. And then at Christmas and Easter, we tend to run an extra kill those weeks to try to deal with the demand. And so there's a bit of a jump up at both of those peaks. So this is sort of how the plant would like to see it. But that's the main challenge of the industry it is trying to find year-round supply is a major issue. If you're in the beef industry, cattle are a lot older when they go to market. Lamb are typically 5 to 8 months old. So in order to have 12 months supply, we have to stretch. or come up with a solution like we're trying to do, breeding every week. This is part of that same sort of selection. Just, we'll run into some slides about where we're focusing on contracted supply. So this is sort of underpinning that strategy. So our contract drive is really about trying to source out of season or year-round lambers. So guys like us, or guys that just have lambs early in the year. So the March to August period is what I consider the tight supply. That's where it's a real big challenge. And then in September through to Christmas, it's quite plentiful, and we can, that January, February lull is a little easier to manage. But so if you're going to have 100 lambs in March to August as an out of season lamb, or you'll tend to have a bit more than 100 lambs through September and February, just with the general seasonality around fertility. Conventional lambers, the guys that'll lamb in the spring and market in the fall, either as a finished or a feeder, they tend not to have anything available March through August, or maybe at the end of August they'll start to have some. But there's an abundant amount of lambs that are available in the fall. And so our focus the last 4 or 5 years has been to focus on contracting and with producers that view lambing as their full-time business. And so the guys that we contract with, we called them the inner circle years ago. Now we're calling them the growth group. We've been using this term for the last couple of years. So just carrying on this, I got some pictures, and this is just as an example. So year-round suppliers generally are, rough rule of thumb, there'd be maybe 10 of those year-round suppliers for every 100 conventional guys. So, those guys might give us 1,000 lambs in May to August. And then they'll have maybe a little bit more than 1,000 for September, December during the abundant supply, and then back to around 1,000 in January to April. Conventional guys tend to only have lambs available in big quantities September to December, with some exceptions, of course. This is a very general way to show the pattern. So in terms of year-round supply broken into 3-4 month sections, this is what I would characterize as an extreme view of the issue. So we have a lot of lambs. The year-round lambers can have pretty stable supply year-round. That's the blue guys. And then the green guys would be the guys that just have a huge slug of lambs available September and December. And so how we've typically dealt with this is, as a feedlot, we'll buy a bunch of lambs, we'll fill to the brim, and other guys will too, and we'll stretch them into Easter, into May. And if they were born in June, maybe we can get them a little bit further yet. But the big challenge there is lambs when they get 10, 11, 12 months old, some of them can turn into mutton in terms of dentition, and it becomes very unprofitable when you start having what we call mutton fallouts. Lambs that are finished, that are stretched, but as they're approaching a year old, they'll lose two teeth and start, as soon as the teeth protrude the gum line, it becomes mutton as far as labeling at the plant. The other solution that we've spent a lot of time on until this market swing at 16 months ago was okay, so we'll stretch lambs into January and April. And in order to do that, we'll take lambs that would have been normally available in September and December of our own, the blue lambs, stretch them to January and April, and then stretch some of those lambs into May and August to help deal with that. So a lot of stretching, and we were fairly comprehensive in the programs we were offering. So we filled to the brim in our feedlot. We worked with guys, external guys, to try to contract lambs on their feedlots into the winter and into the May-June period. And we were participating actively in auctions, either ourselves or through buyers. But what we've, and we'll show you the slides on terms of market pricing. But what we ended up settling at in the last, I'd say the last 6 months, is what we're thinking the advantage of this view is to focus just on contracted supply, the blue guys. And of course we could try to pick up a little bit of the commodity conventional guys in September and December, but we're less aggressive on trying to fill our feedlot right now. The price of lambs even last fall was starting to get pretty high, and to stretch a lamb that you buy in October into May's, it could cost $100 more than regular finishing. So it becomes a bit of an expensive proposition. So our focus is really turning into focusing on year-round supply. And really having contracts with producers is our best way to help us guarantee it. You know, previously when we were going back to the slide like this, we were always aggressive in our marketing programs. So every fall we felt really bullish about where we would be, or into the summer and getting into the fall, we thought we'd have a full feedlot, have good arrangements with guys, but in it was never seeming to be enough. So in 2020, with the market spiked, we ended up buying heavy. A lot of those lambs were pretty red ink by the time they came out into lamb finished products. We let a lot of retailers down. So if we think we have the product and we put together great marketing and feature activity and we don't have the lamb, it becomes very problematic for retailers. So this, we think, is a more stable program. You know, lamb is 100% of our business. It's a good portion of the producers that we work with, their business too. So we live and breathe in the lamb world. But our retailers, you know, the average meat department in Canada, lamb only accounts for 1 to 2% of their sales. So one of our key principles of marketing is don't be a problem. Don't short your customer. You know, try to make sure you have things well planned out, and don't give them a reason to be looking at offshore lamb in those summer months when offshore lamb is abundant and they want to do big barbecue features. So it's a real big challenge for us. So part 3 about markets. I got some slides here that I updated for the presentation last month for the contract drive. So a lot of different lamb markets out there. What we've landed on is using the Ontario weekly market report to drive our marketing or our pricing mechanism. So I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing on terms of contracts and our pricing mechanism in a moment, but this is where we derive those numbers. So there's 2 finished lamb categories I'll focus in on here. That in Ontario, the finished lamb category is 95 to 109 pounds. They want something under 110 pounds for their finished lamb. The other one that we look at a lot is 110 pound plus category. Our target lamb for the plant is 122 pounds live arriving to Innisfail. So we take the 2 of those markets and average them to come up with a weighted average for the livestock cost. But each of these I put onto a slide. So that 110 pound plus category is the dark green line. So that's the weight of the weight being sold that week in Ontario multiplied by the price. So it's a true value of the dollars per lamb. The light dotted blue, the green line, is 109 or 95 to 109 pound plus category. And then the dark blue line is what I call a feeder lamb. It's the 65 to 79 pound category. Our target feeder lamb arriving at Iron Springs would be about 75 pounds is ideal. In the summer, we can go a little bit lighter, but as we get into winter, we like to have them a little bit heavier to be more robust. But if they're starting to become 85 to 95 pounds, those aren't really a feeder lamb. Those become less economical for a feedlot to take to finishing weights. But you can see the trend line over the last few years. It's been going up slowly and steadily into 2017, 2018, 2019. And, you know, 2020, beginning of 2020 or into 2019, I used to say that this lamb protein pricing curve is the most, it's probably this lamb price is the most reliable or most seasonal protein pricing I've seen. Like beef and pork, there's a lot more different kind of fluctuations or world events or foreign currency exchange fluctuations. Lamb was pretty predictable, and it still is to some point. You're always going to see the peak of the finished lamb into May, end of May, early June, before the spring lambs come in, and you'll start to see the blue line, the feeder lambs, turn as we get into late October into November, and then in November the Christmas carcass market starts to drive that pricing upward too. But as we get into what happened in 2020 and then into 2021, it's a pretty dramatic difference. So we had lamb pricing peak in last April, May, close to $450 a lamb. I think it was $435 was the record. So that's this whole supply or pricing curve causes quite a bit of havoc to lamb processors, as you might imagine. Our main business is retail, so it takes a quarter or two with a major retailer before you can get pricing pushed forward. But you also got to keep in mind the only thing that retailers will buy are the main primal cuts, the the loins, the legs, the racks, some shoulder cuts, some sirloins, but you have to move the whole carcass, and it's impossible to find black ink when it starts to get that high. And it's hard for me to see on this curve, but on the far right, what had happened in December, the pink lines are December. December this year is actually higher than last year. So I would expect to see by the time we get to April, May, pretty astronomical pricing again. I don't know how long-term this will last. Obviously when feed is the price it is, it's nice on the lamb producer side to see it, but it'll be hard to see. Time will tell whether or not how stable this retail price is. When beef spikes, people might still pay for it. If you're 1 to 2% of the meat case, like you are in the lamb business, you want to just make sure that people are still buying your product, that you're not becoming a high shrink item or a problem for the retailer. But it's a challenge. If a retailer's out of beef or they're out of pork or chicken, the meat manager is usually being yelled at by customers. If they're out of lamb, I don't know how many people complain. So that's the issue we deal with as an industry. Contracted supply. So this is the only way that NALC needs to rely on contracted supply in order to be able to make commitments to its retailers, like I mentioned earlier, and to have some stability in terms of pricing. Although we'll get into how we do the contracting, we do have a market-based fluctuation. So when we talk about any supplier or vendor or even our relationships with our customers, we talk about this acronym called Daifodis. And it means delivered in full, on time, and in specification. So, if we're working with our packaging guys or if we're working with our customers, we focus on making sure we never short them, that if we make a commitment, it's going to be there on Monday, it's there on Monday, and this is the spec that we're delivering. When we come to producers, we want to make sure that when a producer books in 200 head of lambs for 2 weeks from now, that they're delivering in full, on time, and in specification. In specification, we'll spend some time on. So what do we mean by spec? So the basics that we talk to our contracting group are about, we want to make sure the lambs are clean, that there's not a lot of tag on the wool. We've really made leaps and bounds on our shelf life over the last couple few years, especially. But a big part of that is just the lambs are a lot cleaner coming in on average than they used to be. And that presents a problem for some guys, especially in the spring, if they're not staying on top of pen cleanliness and bedding and that sort of thing. Want to make sure lambs are healthy. They can't be pregnant. We don't want to see a bunch of pregnant ewes on the floor, and they have to be food safe. And by food safe, I mean that they're free of all their drug withdrawals. They don't have any foreign material like needles in them, and that they've been off feed long enough that their bellies aren't full. A full stomach presents a lot of trouble when you're trying to eviscerate and take the offals out. If you have too full of a stomach, it's really easy to burst that stomach as you're lifting it out of the carcass and cause widespread contamination. So in terms of what a producer can control, we try to keep this very simple. I just try to explain it that we want to just focus on the weight for now. Make sure you're shipping us the right weight. That'll optimize the revenue, and then just pay attention to make sure that they're not over fat. If they're over fat, over time, you can make some improvements on feeding and genetics to play with that. So what is the weight spec? So we talk about everything in terms of rail weight and in terms of our contract drive. It's all priced on the rail, not live. We're trying to hit a 27 kilo target is the average for a drive. So about 122 pounds will deliver that, give or take, depending on the season. And I could talk a little bit about rinse and chill a little later. So our target range is between 24 and 30 kilos, but we really go up to 32 kilos before we change the pricing. So it's a 6 kilo target zone. So on the rail, 6 kilo target zone plus anything between 20 to 32 is the same price roughly. So it's a 12 kilo carcass range, which in pounds would translate to anything between 90 and and 145 pounds live before any discounts are applied. And so in rinse and chill adds about almost a kilo on average, and we can get into that. So ideally 122 pounds is your target weight at the plant. So at the farm here, we'll ship at 56.5 kilos or around 125 pounds, and they'll shrink out on their drive up to land at 122. So you know, ideally what you want to do is ship between 110 and 135 maybe, and you'll be in that 24 to 30 kilo zone. So our contract principles is we're trying to encourage out of season supply. So we have what we call a 1-for-1. So for every lamb that you contract in March to August, we will take another lamb in the fall and winter as well. Our goal is to exceed auction pricing in the long run, and we have floor pricing in place to insulate from some seasonal market downturns. So we have a floor price. Probably the best floor price we have is our fall and winter floor price. It's pegged at $9, and so that tends to be the biggest difference between market and what our contract guys get is that price. And then we want to have sustainable pricing that helps grow the farming side and the market. So a $435 lamb is not going to grow much of the market very quickly. But if we're only paying $200 a lamb, we know that that's tough for producers on a year-round side. So we need to be somewhere in the middle. So our floor pricing, we'll get into the contract. So the contract, we market it as the 5 pillars. I won't get into too much detail here. This will be the overview of the contract, and I got an hour-long YouTube presentation. If you really want to get the details, you can email Kathy or myself, and we can flip you the link. But we've simplified the rail grid. So if you reached out to us 3 or 4 years ago, we had a series of different step downs in terms of pricing, but we kept it really simple. We have a per kilo price up to the 27 kilo range. So say it's 10 or 11 bucks depending on the season. It's 9 in the fall. So just for simple math, so we all can do the math quickly. So 27 kilo carcass times by $10 is a $270 price. And then what we do is over 27 kilos, we'll hold it $270 all the way up to 32 kilos. So you don't keep getting $10 a kilo past the 27 kilo mark. We don't want to encourage 32 or kilo lambs. So we keep it stable instead of having step downs. We have a simple high floor price. So in March, April, May, it's 11 bucks. Otherwise it's 10 into June, July, and August, and then September through February, it's 9. But the biggest change we rolled out last year after all the pricing came up is we have a weekly market adjustment. So we look at what that Ontario market did, and if the Ontario market's averaging $435 that week, we make the base price 435 divided by 27 kilos. So we automatically adjust for that. We had a $25 basis before last June because it cost $25 to ship lambs from Alberta to Ontario, just the transport cost, not the shrink. But we've removed that. So that basically gives a lot of the benefit of being able to go to 122 or 125 pounds instead of 105 pounds in Ontario. There's a cost to gain in order to get them that heavy, but we also give that full benefit back to the producer. We also last year started offering up to 3-year contracts. So if guys are trying to grow, we'll sign the contract for 3 years. If their bank wants something special because they're doing a big growth change or something and they want a 5-year deal, we can work with guys on that. And then the 5th pillar we talk about is something called rinse and chill. We added a new technology called rinse and chill in 2018 in December. And what it does is shortly into the harvest process, we open up the lamb, we put this probe in the heart, and we circulate super chilled water through the circulatory system. So it flushes the blood out. It's got a bit of, I'll call it electrolytes to help with the pH conversion when it goes from muscle into meat, so we get better tenderness. But by flushing the water through there, we add some weight to the carcass that goes over the hot scale. So it usually translates to about a kilo extra weight for the producer, but that extra water and moisture will evaporate over the first night. So we don't have any extra water in the carcass by the time it's a finished product. but we get phenomenal shelf life gain. So at that moment, we increased 2 weeks worth of shelf life. I think we're approaching almost 7 weeks right now of shelf life, which is dramatic. You know, I'd say 4 or 5 years ago, we were still 3 weeks on bone in and 4 weeks on boneless. So a pretty significant jump in shelf life gain, and things like the heart and the offals are cold right away. So it really manages the cold chain, which helps us significantly drop down bacterial load and extend shelf life. So the growth group label that we've been putting on all of our contracted producers, we're trying to create a bit of a group or network. And so we've been meeting every quarter over the last year, where we share what's been with this group, the growth group. They get an email every week with the market price, and then every quarter we'll have a web session like this, where we do an update of the market, what we're doing, and then some Q&As. As we get more involved on the farming side, we are in the farming side, we'll start introducing some of our experts and stuff, and we'll maybe have special sessions on fertility or feeding or whatnot. It's kind of what we're thinking moving forward. If you're interested in more information, I'd point you to 2 different people. Kathy Crone is the main person that deals with producers in terms of logistics and scheduling in the plant. She works in Innisfail. I would be, if you want any, you can also reach out to me, either on some details, but I usually direct people first at Kathy. She's sometimes a bit more reachable than I can be at times, but obviously if you want a more detailed discussion or something you want to reach out to me, feel free. My cell phone's here, my email's here. But that's mostly what I have prepared. I'll see how I'm a little bit earlier on time, but we'll see how the Q&As go, and I have some slides if there is some interest on the contract side. Does anybody have any questions? Usually, I was telling Ashley before this conversation, usually I blow by my time limits. So I'm actually quite surprised I'm early on this one.
I have a question.
Yeah.
We are in Northeast BC in Fort St. John.
Yeah.
So with this, are you interested in us at all or no?
Yeah, we have contracts. We had some contracts with some colonies in the Peace area last year. Okay. And so, yeah, if we could work the logistics out, we can make it work.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Okay. Thank you.
We have 3 or 4 contracted guys in Manitoba and 1 in Saskatchewan. We'd like to grow more in Saskatchewan. Logistics are the challenge, especially on finished lamb contracts. So what we were working on with some of the guys in the Peace Country, you know, where they have lambs available in July and August, and they have, you know, in order to do full loads, they're going to maybe have to send some feeder lambs down too. So we can make that work. We could send the finished lambs to the plant and then take the feeders to the feedlot if it helps with logistics in some of these cases.
Are there any other questions from those in attendance this evening? We'll do a final call out for it.
Well, feel free to reach out to me if you were expecting something a little bit more detailed on some of these points. I intentionally left this fairly general, because if we start diving into the details in the contracts, that becomes a little bit longer conversation, especially the market mechanism, how that works, and some of the finer points that we deal with.
Will there be a copy of this recording available?
Yes, there will be a copy that's going to get emailed out tomorrow morning to all the participants, as well as being uploaded on our website and YouTube channel.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. one last call for any questions from those in attendance.
Did you say that you had some contract slides that you were going to go through, Wade?
Yeah, I have some, if you have some questions about like how the pricing looks and stuff.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Sure.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll spend a couple more minutes on some of these things. This is how the grid looks now. If you've seen a copy of it in the past, it was a lot more complicated. So we're trying to highlight here that the range is 24 to 30. But if you have lambs that are less than that, you still get the base price. So say $10 in this case. And if you exceed 30, we have we have still the flat price up to 32. So we still have fat discounts. So it's a 30-cent discount if you're a YG3 or a 50-cent discount if it's a YG4. We downgraded the discount slightly when we rounded it from pounds to kilos. And then we have if their lambs are heavy or super heavy, then we have a $20 per head discount. So, but you'd have to be probably over 145 pounds live in order to trigger that. And so before we had a bunch of step downs, so to try to discourage people from going too heavy, but we found a way in our software to make it simpler here. So you'll get a base price if you're under 27 kilos, and you'll get a flat price if you're over. This is the flat prices. So in 2020, you'd see we had a lot more complicated like increments and change. In 2021, we just rounded it to 11, 10, and 9. And I've left it for 2022. With the market mechanism, there's almost no need to change this floor price now. What used to be the contract price, now it's the floor price. So that $9 price is the lowest here. But like last year, the floor price, the way the Ontario market predicted it, went into the 7s, which is normal. So this 9 protects our contracted guys from that. This is the market mechanism. So this is where I could spend a long time explaining it. So I take everything over 195 pounds, so the two categories, and we do a weighted average. So this is pretty straightforward. If you want to look at the YouTube and pause it, you can recalculate it, or if you want, you could reach out to Kathy or myself, and I could send you how the calculation works. But you basically take the weight. So there's, in this one category, the average 102 pounds, and the 110 plus category is 118 pounds. So you take 102 by $3.29 type of thing. And then you put those together and you get $337 per lamb on the one category and $383. And then you take a weighted average with the volume here. So the thing that's awesome about the Ontario market is they give you this true weighted average where, the total field gives you a range of weights, a range of prices. So does olds. It's really hard there's not a lot of transparency in that market like there is in Ontario. So that's why we use it. The other reason is Ontario is the largest lamb market, and what happens in Ontario tends to drive what happens out west. So we think it's a pretty fair representation. And so we'll just take the weighted average, in this case 350, divide it by 27 kilos, and we'll land at a base price, and we round that. 3-year contracts. Some people are wondering why we're doing that, and we came out with the multi-year one because we wanted to encourage growth, and since we had that market mechanism and stuff, we wanted to prove to producers that we weren't just doing this to take advantage of or how to come up with a contract with a bunch of market swings. So we did up to 3-year contracts, and we did that again this year. And it helps us. We already have a bank of contracted lambs in the next year, so we know what we think is the minimum we'll be able to, we'll use the contracted supply plus our own supply to drive our merchandising effort with retailers. Here's some math on rinse and chill. So there's some seasonality. So when pricing was lower, say $9 or $10 kind of thing, that worked out to about a $10, just under $10 pickup for a producer. Obviously, if it's a $10 base price and you get an extra kilo, it's pretty straight to the math. But when pricing is higher than like it is right now, then it's even more. But yeah, those are the slides I had Darlene, in terms of the detail. Do you have any questions on that?
No, thanks. Yeah, no, it's nice to see the way the breakdown is off the Ontario market. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You need to dry your hair.
like I said, if you want the math behind it, we could flip you an attachment that gives you a bit more detail.
Yeah, that'd be great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I specifically didn't include those because I didn't want this to be a big sell job on trying to do contracts. The biggest takeaway I want to leave with the group here is that, you know, we've been focused a lot on growing our own internal production, but we still want to have external producers. We've got 25 to 30 producers that we're contracted with under this deal, and it, you know, our minimum contract volumes ideally are 200 head. So you know that would be ideal, but we do have guys that have less than that. They're working on getting to 200, and we got a small handful of guys that are under that. So you don't have to be huge to work with us. We've got some guys that contract, you know, 1,500 lambs a year, but we're trying to be open to working with guys that are trying to grow, or you know, approach the market the same way we do. So for us, it's really a we want a long-term arrangement so we can focus on dialing in our own operations, whether it's marketing at the plant or improving our pre-wean mortality on our farming side. We're going to put less resources into having a guy run around and try to buy lambs on a spot basis or cash basis. It makes more sense just to focus on growth.
Yeah, I did have one more question. When you were talking about the discounts, so there's the floor price and I noticed that the spread on weights, you're not discounting weight anymore, like unless it's extreme, like over the 145 or whatever. But you said your fat score, so you're just still using like the caliper to measure fat score. And so how many mils of fat is pushing you over?
Yeah, so
into the 30 and 50 discount.
Yeah, so YG3 is 19 to 23 mils. And so YG1, it's what yield grade is what YG stands for. So yield grade 1 is, we changed that a little bit. What is it down here? So it used to be anything 5 through 12 was yield grade 1. So we went down to anything 4 and above is a yield grade 1 to up to 12. And then I think 13 to 18 is a yield grade 2. So that's just the base price, and then we'll do the discounts after. Anything YG3 or over is considered over fat.
So okay, sorry, you just cut out when you
Oh,
were
the internet at
talking.
Iron Springs is great. So,
So
yeah.
the base price was what were the? You said the base price was 3.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, so yield grade 1 starts at 4 millimeters to 12 millimeters. So there's no discount from 4 millimeters all the way through 18.
To 18 millimeters.
Yeah, that's yield grade 1 and yield grade 2.
1, yield 2. Okay, and there's no discount.
No, and those measurements are the same that were in the Canadian grading standards from years ago. We haven't tweaked them too much, except we made the YG, you know, we went instead of 5+, we went 4+.
And then the 3 and the 4. Okay, I see. 19 to 23 is on 3. 24 plus is 4. So that's where and that's 50 cents a kilo, not a pound, right?
That's a kilo, yeah. So it's a discount, no question, but it's more important to focus on your weight. Because if you sell us a 24 kilo lamb at $10 base price, say, that's $240, but that same lamb would be worth $270 if you put an extra 3 kilos on, and it'd be about 6 kilos live. But even with your cost of gain, you're far better off to put the extra weight on.
Right. Yeah. No, super. Thank you.
We also have I guess I should also point out, we have what we call a 3% tolerance on the super heavy. So if you do end up you send us 100 lambs and 3 of them are over 32 kilos, we actually don't discount those either. We just say, oops, you know, you're doing what you can, but so there's a bit more latitude for producers there. So, I mean, in full transparency, what we wrote on here is on average, because you're never going to have a whole load of 100 lambs exactly at 27 kilos. There's going to be a range there, and you're probably going to be 15 to 20% over fat. So sometimes less. Some people are even less than that. But on average, then you're going to probably be about $15 off of the flat price on average for an average load. So if you get a $10 base price or $270 flat price, you're probably going to average $255 for an average quality load. If that makes sense. An $11 base would be about $285 on average, even though the flat price would be about $300. And then, but I think right now the pricing is $12, $14 on the base price based on Ontario.
I'm just want to be clear, the difference between the base price and the flat price again, I just want to be clear on this.
The base price multiplied by 27 kilos is the flat price. So 10 times 27 kilos is 270 would be the flat price.
Okay.
So it's hard. I don't know if you can see, I have to move my thing around here. So off to the far right, it says at a $9 base, you have a flat price of $245, 10 equals 270, and 11 equals 300.
Okay. Oh, yeah, okay. That makes sense now that I can look to the side. Thank you.
But that base price now, for guys that are contracted, that base price fluctuates every week with the market mechanism. So if they're saying that lambs are worth $350 in Ontario this week, then the base price I think is $12. And we change that. So when the pricing comes out on Wednesday morning, and so we use that price from Thursday through to the following Wednesday kill, if we're killing on Wednesday. So,
But there's a floor price that you don't go below, correct?
correct. We'll never go below 9 between September and February, and we'll never go below 10 and 11 in our spring and summer season.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? Oh, great. I'll hand it back to Ashley.
I do have a question. Do
Yep.
you have like I know there's a discount for DAG for dirt. Is it possible for you to send photos to those of us on the like on this group or whatever of examples of what would be considered a lot and what would not be? Like what would be discounted and what wouldn't be, so there's a visual for people to know what's considered discountable. I mean, everyone knows what a really clean lamb is. I mean, clearly no DAG at all.
Yeah, but we don't expect them to be totally clean. I mean,
Yeah, that's why I was wondering if you had examples of you know, obviously ideal is perfectly clean, and then there's a range like where you're going to accept it, and then where, okay, we've got to get them shorn, so you're going to pay for this. Like, would you have photos available that we'd be able to have, just so we have a visual?
Yeah, I'd have to look for some. We actually don't do a lot of discounting on this regard unless they're really muddy. So if you've got balls of where it's most concerning for us is in the belly area, the belly and the legs, and you know, just draw a line right through the midline of the belly. That's where the knife has to go in. So if you've got clumps of shit and manure down there, that can be a problem. And we usually do a half discount if it's a new guy. They're kind of dirty. We used to do a percentages, like if it's 25, or we just kept it simple. It's either half dirty or fully dirty. But the fully dirty ones are there's mud all over the lamb.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have a lot of trouble. I mean, we have really peaty soil, so it just kind of all falls off. But I just was curious as to what, you know, where the line is.
Sometimes we have weird stuff where there's like where it's dry, really dry dust, and that could cause us some issues too. But those are, I'm getting into the fine weeds here. It's usually when you see large clumps of shit hanging off the lamb, it's more of an issue for us.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions for Wade? All right, well, with that, I'd like to thank you, Wade, and to all of our participants who have joined us this evening. This will conclude our webinar. I will be sending an email to everyone who registered for the session that will include a link to where you can access the webinar recording tomorrow morning.
Hey, thanks everyone for participating and the opportunity, Ashley.
Yes, thank you very much for attending.